Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to you by Patches. Get your patches here. 99 cents.
What?
Just go to whichsidecollective.org and you can get any of our patches for only 99 cents. You just gotta use code SNOWGODS, or if you prefer, SNOWMASTERS. It doesn't really matter. You can use either of them.
That is cheaper than a fucking dollar store.
Yeah. Like, a lot cheaper.
Whichsidecollective.org. Go get some patches. This is episode 167.
Yeah, we talk to Victoria Moran from Main Street Vegan.
She went vegan in the early 80s. Not only went vegan in the early 80s, raised a vegan child in the early 80s. Like, holy shit.
Totally. I mean, I remember how awful it was having to mail order like nutritional yeast and boxed shelf.
She could only buy soy milk, like powdered via the mail.
Yeah,
this is pre-internet. Like, it's not like there's no internet around. I don't even know how she found that. By the way, that is insane. Stay tuned for that. It's a lot of fun. Jordan, what news and events do we have going on this week?
If you're listening this on the day that it came out, tomorrow on the 19th of January is the prisoner letter writing night for Denver ABC. So if you're in Denver, check that out. Speaking of prisoners, on January 22nd, it is the International Day of Trans Prisoner Solidarity. So go to transprisoners.net and check out all the events all over the world. And write some prisoners. This week's listener shout out comes from Charlotte Malrich. Charlotte said that we could shout out whatever we want. So shout out to the people who are taking back Martin Luther King Day and shutting down bridges and just getting out there and being active in the street. All the Black Lives Matter movement and everyone.
That bridge is a sweet fucking action. If you haven't heard of it, just go Google it. My hat's off to you. For the slingshot this week, every year we've been doing the slingshot. I've done this one this week. And I'm going to do it again this week. So, on the 21st of January, 1994, Lorena Bobbitt was found not guilty for cutting off her abusive husband's penis. I always thought she was guilty until this. I always thought she got found guilty of it. Yeah, I didn't know that she wasn't. Yeah, that is awesome. Totally awesome. Way to go. Well, I am so glad that we actually got to sit down. A little back and forth there for a little bit. But
thank you, and I apologize about last time.
Oh,
no worries.
No worries at all. Before, like, it was right before the holidays we were trying to get before, but now it's been after the holidays. So how were your holidays? If you celebrate holidays, I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, we always stay home, and it's, kind of traditional. Although I suppose if the world looks at it and it's like, it's not traditional, but it's our tradition. And we always have a Boxing Day party. And because, they have in England, they do 2 days of Christmas. Mm-hmm. And that's really fun because it's always, obviously very vegan. And my husband and I both lived in England at different times before we met. So that's a fun thing every year.
So Boxing Day is where you watch boxing, right?
It was traditionally when there were servants in the big homes, and they worked on Christmas, serving the meals and so forth. So on Boxing Day, they got the day off, and the family brought them food and gifts in boxes.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always wondered what it was. Over here in America, we don't know.
Now I'm just like, I feel like a dumb American. So what are some of your traditions that you do over the holidays?
Oh, gosh. Well, our family is small. My husband's kids are Canadian, and they're usually in Toronto, or his daughter now lives in London. So we usually don't see them. But my daughter and son-in-law are here, and they're actually in our neighborhood. We're all in Harlem in New York City. Mm-hmm. So we tend to cook one meal at home and go out for one meal. So it's either, Christmas Eve in, Christmas Day out, or vice versa. We also tend to do a rather major Christmas breakfast. My son-in-law has invented some pretty fabulous pancakes. We put the recipe in the Main Street Vegan book. So that's kind of traditional. And Christmas Eve night, we usually watch a Christmas movie because I'm sort of part elf. I love that kind of thing. And my daughter wrote something called Santa Paws, which is night before Christmas takeoff, but it's written from the point of view of Santa's dog and how he goes one Christmas in the sleigh with Santa to deliver presents to all the companion animals. And then he realizes, well, wait a minute, we forgot the animals in the pound. And so she goes into some detail about how they go to the pound and remember those animals too. So, we read all that. And it's funny because they don't have any children. There are no children in our family at this point. And yet we're kind of like grown-up children, stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
So, you raised your daughter vegan, right?
I did. She was vegan from infancy. I was still lacto-ovo vegetarian when I was pregnant. But when she was about 6 months old, she was still nursing. She hadn't had any kind of non-vegan food and very little non-breast milk. But I looked down at her one day and I knew, the food thing was going to be coming up. And I thought, I can't try to sell her this half-truth for convenience that I've kind of sold myself. Because by then, I'd been vegetarian for quite a while, and I had tried to be vegan, but there were some challenges. One was simply, it was a lot harder to be vegan then. Mm-hmm. Really, really difficult. We're talking 1983. But also, I had been a practicing compulsive eater, a binge eater, and standing in the middle of the night in the 7-Eleven trying to get my binge food, I just wasn't going to be reading if the junk food had egg or dairy in it, and most of it did. So it had been really difficult. And so I don't know how vegan I was at that point. I don't know if I was 70%, 80%. I don't know. I did my best, but I could not say that I was vegan. And I looked down at her and I thought, this is a completely innocent little human, and I want to give her the best shot at life that I possibly can, both so that she can be healthy, but even more so that her soul can evolve in the most powerful way possible. I think all parents, want to give their kids the world to the degree that they're able to understand what that is. And I thought, how can I possibly say to this beautiful child, well, we don't drink milk at home because we know that that's stealing the milk from the baby calf. But when we're out and have to have something to put in our coffee, what can we do? And it was just like, okay, you don't even really believe that yourself, and you certainly can't do that to your child. So it was November, and I don't remember the exact date. I think maybe November 13th or 14th of 1983. I said, okay, I'm doing this. So that was the start. or the continuation.
That's so amazing to me, because so many people, unfortunately, will be vegan, get pregnant, and then stop because of fear of the kid, instead of having the new child be kind of an inspiration for taking the final step.
Yeah, I see that a lot, particularly during pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that I had been vegan in my pregnancy. In fact, my daughter did have a lot of bronchitis and respiratory kinds of issues all through her childhood and into young adulthood. And I read not long ago that the mothers consuming dairy products in pregnancy can lead to that in a child. And this was really difficult because there we were vegan and doing everything right, but she would still get frequent ear infections and all these other difficulties. And so, I don't know why, it could be all kinds of reasons. I'm very adamant that not every evil that befalls humans comes from what they eat. And yet it may well have had something to do with the dairy during pregnancy. When I have known vegan moms who have been pregnant while they're expecting, obviously they're careful, but everybody's careful. This is an interesting thing. When a woman is pregnant, she is so concerned about this new life that very often women who drink, women who smoke, even women who are addicted to drugs and can't piece together 9 days of clean and sober can do it for 9 months when they're pregnant. Not all the time, but sometimes just because they care about this other person. Mm-hmm. And this is why I tell people that it's really important to embrace the ethical aspects of being vegan, because if you're doing it for your own health, well, that's kind of a diet. And you can say, yeah, well, a little bit won't hurt. But when you're really caring about the other, in that case, the animal, a little bit is everything. It's kind of cool to see how inherently altruistic we really are when we give ourselves that opportunity.
You touched on a bunch of things I want to get back to, but one of the things that really strikes me is my wife, when she was pregnant, she was really worried about like having cravings of reading things and people having cravings. And really, the only thing she ever craved was chocolate soy milk and veggie dogs. So,
oh, that's so nice.
But and that's one of the things that really strikes her is like how many people choose not to be vegan during pregnancy. It's one of the things she does. She's always searching for people online who's having a hard time and tries to reach out to them, to know, so they know that it's possible and people can get through it, and that there is support structures out there.
Right. And between knowing what nutrients are in various animal foods, and also in nowadays it's so easy to replace the flavors and the textures that somebody is craving. It's not what it once was. I mean, at the time that I went vegan, there was nothing. I mean, there was no soy milk. Mm-hmm. There was some powder. It was very sugary. And you could maybe get it. There was a Worthington brand you could get in some health food stores. Of course, there were very few health food stores. They were these very small, dusty places. I remember the first one I walked into and I picked up some canned mock meat and it left this ring of dust. People hadn't been there in a while. But then I remember we also used to order soy milk powder in plain plastic bags from this guy in Ohio. And the only way we knew it wasn't cocaine was that it was only $7.95. But we just got this bag of white powder. I mean, it could have been anything. So, it was different. But nowadays, there's so much. And people very often will say, vegan, there's so many junk food vegans. And it's like, well, I understand that. Now we have to be as discerning as omnivores if we want to be, nutritionally intact. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, if you're a pregnant mom craving donuts or pizza or whatever it is, well, hallelujah, you can have those vegan today.
Mm-hmm. What's really funny is, so my daughter was born in 2006. I went vegan in the early 90s. And the difference between those two things is night and day. I can't imagine being vegan in the early 80s.
It was pretty tough. And I actually went vegetarian in, you're going to think I'm an antique, 1969. And I learned about veganism shortly thereafter, I heard about the J. and Freya Dinshaw and the American Vegan Society, which had actually been founded in 1960. And I learned about them in 1970. And that was when I knew that vegan was the way to go, even though I personally wasn't able to do it yet. But trying at that time, I mean, it was just wild. And I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, which these days is a really cool veg town. I mean, they have a vegan coffee house where all the wraps and the scones are vegan, and they have every kind of non-dairy milk, and it's so cool. They have a bunch of restaurants, including the only Cafe Gratitude outside California. They've got a vegan meal delivery service, so it's very veg-friendly now, but oh my gosh, back then, I mean, I can remember when they opened the first salad bar, and I thought it was just for me.
What's been like the most shocking change as far as just dietary choices now for you?
Well, I think the coolest thing that happened to me was probably in the early 90s when I discovered dark leafy greens. Because in the old days, even though going vegan pretty much meant you were going to get fairly healthy because there was no junk food, very, very few processed foods. I mean, if you really wanted to go after junk food, you could have French fries, Planters peanut bars, soda with sugar in it, but there wasn't much. And yet, the way that most of us ate back then, it wasn't really vital. It was kind of brown. So we ate a lot of brown rice and brown bread and lentil soup and lentil loaf and lentil burgers. I mean, it was really monochromatic. And I remember discovering Ethiopian food on a trip to Los Angeles with my daughter. And she was so crazy about this Ethiopian food because you eat it with the wonderful stretchy bread because they believe that knives are weapons. So I started learning how to cook this stuff, particularly a dish called gomen, which are wonderful, spicy collard greens and kale. I had never had that kind of food, even as a vegan. And I'd hardly ever heard of them. I remember when I was 9 years old and I was a fat little kid trying to fix myself, I went into my dad's medical office in his private office and climbed up on the desk and pulled down this big old nutrition book that he'd had in medical school. And in that book, there was something very similar to that Andy chart that Dr. Furman has done for Whole Foods markets that lists foods by nutrient density. And it said that the most nutrient dense foods were things like collards, kale, arugula, mustard green, Swiss chard. I had never heard of any of this stuff. I didn't know how to pronounce them. I thought they were all from foreign countries. It was just completely out of my sphere. And I think that the coolest thing that has happened nutritionally in veganism in recent years is that we have actually discovered vegetables. I mean, I used to think, gosh, I know all these vegetarians, but we hardly eat any vegetables. And now I think we really do have a sense of the vegetables and the fruits and the whole big variety of beans and all these wonderful foods. So the variety has really picked up, and the color and the nutrition, and it's just more fun.
You know, I definitely fall victim into this. So being vegan through the early 90s, you're right. It was very, just lentils and brown rice and wheat bread and, and then a couple of staples, potatoes and carrots. And then I went right to, oh my God, there's Oreos I can eat. And so I kind of skipped actually really discovering, and I really done a disservice to myself because I love dark collard greens. I love this type of food, but I've never made it a staple,
Yeah, and it's really important. And I think it's more important the older you get. I've just read Dr. Greger's How Not to Die, which has really been a very informative book. And I thought I already knew everything and I was doing everything right. But I've made changes since reading that book, just in how much of the stuff that I'm getting, and just in bringing so many more spices into my diet. Because I learned that cloves, for example, have the most concentrated antioxidants of any food in common usage. And just a tiny little bit, like an eighth of a teaspoon in a chocolate smoothie in the morning, just really ups your antioxidant score. Having a quarter teaspoon of turmeric every day. And I generally make the same thing for lunch. I call it beans and greens. And I start with onion. And then I put in mushrooms, because mushrooms are highly preventive against breast cancer, among other things. And then I'll put in some kind of beans and add whatever greens I have, whether it's kale or spinach or arugula or whatever. And I put in this turmeric, and it gives us this wonderful Indian flavor. And then I add ground black pepper, because black pepper increases the benefits of turmeric. You can get a little bit of the good if you just have it by itself, but if you add black pepper to it, it takes it over the edge to being even more fabulous. And so these are things, I mean, I've been vegan now 32 years. I read that book a month ago. So these are things that I'm learning after 32 years. So one can start and do very well from day one. But you can also learn for the rest of your life. It's very cool.
That sounds like a really good base of like a curry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. I love both using the turmeric, and I also order from a place in Fairfield, Iowa. I don't work for anybody. I'm not any kind of spokesperson at this time. So anything I mention is just I'm telling you things I like. I'm not getting paid or reimbursed or anything. But it's called MAPI, which stands for Maharishi Ayurvedic Products, Inc., I guess. They sell these spice blends that are called churnas. And I'm very interested in Ayurvedic healing, Ayurvedic lifestyle. That's the ancient Indian healing tradition that is still accepted by the World Health Organization as a viable medical art. It's the tradition that Deepak Chopra came from. And they talk about the different body types and also the kinds of influences that are affecting us at different times of the year and different stages of life. So they make these spice blends for each of these three doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha. And I always have those on hand as well, and I tend to be vata, and I'll tend to get, if I'm out of balance, a little bit spacey, a little bit, not as grounded as I would like to be. And I put this wonderful spice blend in the food. And I don't know if it's the placebo effect and I just feel better because I know it's in there, or if it's really doing something. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. If you feel better, you feel better, and that's all good.
I should look into that. I really like spice blends.
Yeah, one of the things we do with Main Street Vegan Academy, which is my 6-day program here in New York City that trains and certifies vegan lifestyle coaches, is we take these field trips to all the cool vegan businesses in New York City, and we've got lots and lots of them. And one place we go is an Indian spice shop in the East Village. And the first thing that happens when they walk in the door is they're just overcome with this unbelievable fragrance. And I think we're so visual in our culture. We're always looking at something on a computer screen, or we're looking at a TV, or we're looking at something, or we've got the earphones in and we're listening to something, that we kind of forget the sense of smell. And these spices, they have such intense color, such intense taste, and such intense smell. And this is how you know that they're full of the phytochemicals and antioxidants. It's kind of the keynote of these wonderful healing substances, is that they have very vibrant colors, tastes, and aromas. So we walk into the store, and get this wowie kind of scent. And then people are able to discover both the common spices, the more unusual spices, some of the little kinds of curious bits of information. For example, cinnamon. Everybody knows cinnamon is good. The regular cinnamon that you can get at any old grocery store has been shown to lower blood sugar to the point that a diabetic who wants to cheat on their blood sugar test can have cinnamon the night before and their blood sugar will be lower the next morning. However, there's another kind of cinnamon called Ceylon cinnamon that comes from Sri Lanka, and it doesn't have a naturally occurring compound that is potentially carcinogenic. So even though the Ceylon cinnamon doesn't have the blood sugar lowering abilities, it's also safer if you're going to be using a substantial quantity every day. So to just learn about these types and these little kind of differences, it's really fun. I don't know, maybe I should go to school and become a spiceologist. There is such a thing.
I noticed that vegans just tend to have way more spices than a normal person.
Well, I think whenever people voluntarily change their diet, when people just do what they've always done, things aren't very interesting. So I think about it even in terms of, say, toothpaste. I mean, what did we all have for toothpaste when we were kids? Probably Crest, maybe Colgate. And when I became, even vegetarian and didn't want to be using products that had been tested on animals, I realized that I was going to have to change my toothpaste. And that meant that I would go to a natural food store and there was all this amazing toothpaste. It was no longer just mint. You had anise and licorice and then all these incredible tooth powders. And I realized that I had become this very interesting person toothpaste-wise. And I think the same thing happens with food. And unfortunately, since I want everybody to be vegan, I do see the same thing happen when people change their diet and they become paleo or whatever they become. Just the idea that they're no longer doing the same old boring stuff they always did. They're inspired to expand and learn more about herbs and spices and cooking techniques and exotic foods and things like that. So it's just a lovely little bonus.
That is one thing I will have to say. I wouldn't have eaten or even tempted to try most of the food I eat now if I wasn't vegan.
Totally.
I would have just, stuck with the mashed potatoes and steak and, lived a happy obese life.
Yeah, it's very interesting how attached people get to a pretty boring way of eating. Something that's different now from back when I switched over, and even when you switched over in the early 90s, there are a lot more people who are attempting to eat healthfully. So you get people that haven't really thought about going vegetarian or vegan, but they are at least trying to eat more fruits and vegetables. And, they're doing the best they can based on the conventional information that's out there. And so that's why I think the health aspects of being vegan are really important to have as an option. I know a lot of people say, I'm only doing this for ethics. It doesn't matter what I eat. Leave me alone. I'm going to have the bag of Oreos. And of course, that's fine. I mean, I would far rather that the world be filled with Oreo vegans than with any kind of animal food consumers.
Okay, good.
But because it used to be people pretty much universally, except for a few very strange health nuts in California, ate the standard American diet. And so just the fact that we're having, the lentils and the brown rice that we talked about before, they're going to do better. But now that people are already having a lot of the good food, and then they become vegan and they think, wow, I haven't had cookies in years. And look at all these vegan cookies and look at the marshmallows and the s'mores and all this stuff. Well, you know what? We got to be careful with that, because when a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, I tried that, it didn't work for me. And that's so frustrating to me as an ethical vegan, because, that's like saying, I tried to be an honest person. It just didn't work for me. So I have to rob banks. I mean, the other thing didn't work. And that's how it sounds to me when people say, I tried to be vegan and it didn't work. well, what didn't work? Let's figure out, were you eating too many junk foods? Did you gain weight? Did you have cravings? Did you feel tired? What was it? And we're going to fix that within the context of your remaining vegan. And there's so many ways to be vegan. And one of the things that scares me a little bit is sometimes I think people get into their particular brand of what kinds of foods that they choose and what kind of diet has really done well for them. And they present this as the only way of being vegan. And I think that's really dangerous when we look at wanting the world to change, because there are people who just do beautifully on a very high starch diet like Dr. McDougall recommends. Mm-hmm. There are people who do great with absolutely no oil like Dr. Esselstyn's people. But there are also people who don't do well on the high carb, very low fat kind of diet. There's a fellow in Toronto, Dr. David J.A. Jenkins, who came up with something that's not very well known in the vegan world. It's called Eco Atkins, and it's a vegan diet that is relatively lower in carbohydrate and relatively higher in fat and protein than most kinds of vegan diets. Now, obviously, it's still going to be a high natural carbohydrate diet because that's the nature of foods from the plant kingdom. But still, the people who are saying, oh, I just really did better when I was on the, low carb kind of diet. Well, they can adjust being vegan just a little bit so that they're having a little bit more of that kind of diet that they're used to, but without any animal products. So if you really want to do this, there's a way to do it.
I definitely fall into that camp of being an ethical vegan that's just like, well, I'm an ethical vegan. I don't, really care. I'm only in it for the animals. Mm-hmm. And I get the aspect that, I'm an animal and blah, 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 and I need to look out for myself, for my family, and set a good example. I understand all that. But one of the things that I think I struggle with that you were talking about earlier was you said you were like a habitual binge eater. And I am completely a binge eater. I will go sometimes 2 or 3 days with 1 or 2 small meals. And then, one whole day of just nothing but stuffing my face, whatever the fuck I can find.
Yeah, it's very common, and it's very common in our society simply because food is easy to get, it's relatively cheap, and there are lots of processed foods. I love something that Dr. Furman says when he says that in all his years as a medical doctor, he has never had an overweight or diabetic person come into his office and say, "Doc, I've got this problem with apples." Because that's not the kind of food we tend to binge on. Now, I know as a binge eater myself that in a pinch, if I was locked in a room and there was nothing there but apples, I would binge on those. But first choice is going to be something very concentrated. Now, a lot of people out in the world say, oh, sugar is the devil. Sugar is the worst thing there is. I understand that refined sugar is not good for people. It's just not something that we need to be eating. But even
it's so good.
Well, and no binge eater binges on sugar cubes or Tic Tacs or cough drops. It's always sugar combined with fat or sugar combined or the fat combined with salt can also be a binge food. So you want to really look at the whole picture. I know for myself in my life, it became extremely serious. I've done a lot of research and work on this over the years. And what I see is that there are 3 categories of people who have a relationship with food that could use some help. The first is just the person who eats the standard American diet. They like food. They have access to a lot of fast food, which is just really a blight on America and the world. And they like food that goes down easily. It's very comforting. They like the kinds of foods they grew up on, particularly if they grew up on a lot of fried foods and sweets and processed foods. And if you combine that with a very low activity level, then you're going to get people who can be extremely obese, but with education and support, they can get over that. Well, then you get into group number 2, and these are the emotional eaters. And very often your emotional eater is going to know a lot about nutrition. She's very often, more often, a woman than a man, although there are certainly male compulsive or male emotional eaters. But the typical emotional eater is a woman who eats pretty well most of the time and who knows everything that they say in the women's magazines and the popular blogs about health and nutrition. And she does that most of the time. But then if life gets really stressful or somebody says something mean or some bad thing happens, then she's into the Haagen-Dazs and that. And that person also needs a little more education maybe on food, but more than that, she's going to need support, different techniques for how to deal with life, maybe some behavior modification, maybe some therapy, and then that person should be okay. But the third category, and that's the category that I eventually made my way to, is compulsive eater or food addict. And the best way to describe that is a rubber band. And you stretch it out and it goes back. You stretch it out and it goes back. But you stretch it enough, one day it's going to break. So what are you going to do? Are you hopeless at that point? Well, of one's own volition, I believe, yes, you probably are. And that's why a food addict, in my opinion and in my experience, needs to treat that situation just the way a drug addict or an alcoholic would in serious recovery from the inside out. There's a wonderful phrase in the Alcoholics Anonymous book, and I think it applies to food addicts as well. It was Carl Jung who said that what is required to end an addiction is, and this is a quote, a complete emotional displacement and rearrangement, something akin to a spiritual experience. And this is very dear to my heart because that was my experience. And I found that for me, a spiritual program of recovery, and I always recommend Overeaters Anonymous to people because they're not about food. They don't tell you what to eat. It's really about this change from the inside out. And why I feel particularly lucky and blessed, and I do go into a lot of detail about this in my book, The Love-Powered Diet, is that I got this change from the inside. And what that gave me was the ability to choose what I would eat. Because before that, I didn't have any choice. It was just, I have to have the food and I have to binge, and I'm going to binge on whatever is here. And I was miraculously able to avoid meat, but anything else was fair game. And once I had that power of choice back, I could choose to be vegan. And that was also a gift because certainly in the days before all the vegan processed foods, the food was very basic, very simple, tended to be lower in fat. So you could have a little more of it and feel satisfied. I mean, nobody gets to be 65 pounds overweight as I was without really enjoying chewing and swallowing. And with a lot of vegetables and fruits and beans, you actually do get to do a lot of that. And so I think it's very important to kind of figure out where one falls in that spectrum. When I work with people, I always ask if they're concerned about this, that they take a quiz that you can find on overeatersanonymous.org, and it's just called, Are You a Compulsive Overeater? And it's very insightful as to where one falls on that list. And to me, it's also wonderful for somebody who's had food problems to become vegan, because then this substance, this food that's caused so much pain and shame in one's life, all of a sudden is something that is saving lives. You're saving the lives of animals, you're nourishing yourself, and it's a beautiful gift. And I feel for me that at the end of that road of 32 years of binge eating or dieting, I was rewarded with the gift of being vegan. And now for the next 32 years, I haven't had to worry about it. I haven't binged. I haven't dieted. I've been normal weight this whole time. And it's pretty darn cool.
With personally myself, I'm going to go take that quiz because when you're talking about those different the three different steps, I would fall somewhere between an emotional and a rubber band, and I know I'm somewhere in that range because I am a very emotional eater, but I do tend to yo-yo back and forth between trying to be extremely cautious of what I'm eating and trying to be helpful to just not caring and doing whatever. But one of the things like I really struggle with is that personally, I know I'm really good at abstaining from things. I'm vegan, so obviously I abstain completely from animal products, but I also I don't consume alcohol. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've been very good at setting my mind to abstaining from something and doing it. But when it comes to things like eating super healthy, I don't want to necessarily abstain from all sweets, or I don't want to necessarily abstain from all certain foods, but I really suck at moderation.
Well, there is such a thing as a binge food, and that is food that for a certain person, they just can't stay away from. And for a lot of people, it is a sweet. Some people can handle the more natural sweets, like something sweetened with dates, but not something sweetened with sugar. For other people, it doesn't matter. If it even seems sweet, it's the kind of thing that one is too many and 1,000 aren't enough. So you have to know these things about yourself. I mean, for myself today, there are very few foods that I feel that I can't have around. One that comes to mind is chocolate silk soy milk. And while we're talking about it, that silk eggnog at Christmas time, that stuff, for some reason, it is extremely enticing. It's not just good. Lots of food is good. It's not just delicious. Lots of food is delicious. But there's almost something seductive about certain foods. And it's just easier to leave them alone because you can spend all kinds of energy trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to have some silk soy milk and chocolate, and I'm going to have 8 ounces in the morning. And you stay up all night thinking about the 8 ounces you're going to have in the morning. Life is just easier if you say, okay, you know what? It's kind of like the Garden of Eden. There's all this great fruit. Why do I want to wreck everything by eating the one that is going to kill me?
That's really funny that you mentioned the chocolate silk, because that is by far been my truth forever. When they had it in the quarts, I would eat just a quart at a time. If I buy a half gallon, I'll set myself up I'll just have a glass now, and then I'll have a glass tomorrow, and then it'll be later that night. I'm well, I'll just have that glass that I'm going to have tomorrow now. And then tomorrow roll around, I'm I'll just have that glass again. And then it's gone.
And another way that you can know that something is a binge food is if you need it every single day. And lots of times people think, you have to eat the entire package of whatever it is. Well, certainly that's a clue. But if there's something that you just, it's just yeah, okay, I need my blank. That's kind of a dependency. And so if it's not causing any trouble in your life and you're fine with it, then fine. But just know that anything you need every day, it's a dependency. It's like people who drink coffee and they need it every morning. Well, that's practically everybody, and that's all fine. But the fact is, it is a dependency, whether you want to call it that or not. And if it's not causing a problem, fine, enjoy. Life is meant to be enjoyed. But if it is causing a problem, sometimes it's just better to stay away. And the great thing about the plant world is it is so vast. Oh my goodness. There's so many amazing fruits and vegetables and dishes and takes on dishes that, I'm looking now at my cookbook shelf because I do a podcast, and probably like you, I get all these cookbooks. And I think, if I live to be maybe 130, I could probably make all these recipes. But, I don't need to, because basically I like the kind of same 10 recipes. So there's so much food. If there's one you decide not to have, back in Catholic school, the nuns used to talk about offer it up. And that's kind of a sweet little phrase. I'm going to offer up that chocolate soy milk, let somebody else have it. Who knows? The fact that I leave the chocolate soy milk in the store just might get some omnivore to try it once, and that's the start of his becoming vegan. Who knows?
One of the things that I know that works really well for me when I'm in that mode of I need, to eat this entire sleeve of Oreos, which turns into the whole package, is tea. For some reason, like I completely am addicted and have a dependency on tea. I will acknowledge that, but it takes away that sweet craving for me. And I don't add anything to it. I don't add sugar. I take it completely plain. But if I want, 5 more cookies instead of having cookies, if I make tea, I'm okay. But I also use that as a complete meal suppressant. So I'll be like, I don't want to have breakfast this morning because I ate too many fucking Oreos last night. So I'm just going to have 8 more cups of tea. So it's pretty unhealthy.
Well, it's just good to stand back sometimes and watch ourselves and say, okay, am I happy with how I'm doing this? And if not, what can I change a little bit? I think it never works when we say, okay, I'm going to become an entirely different person. I've sat on the couch for 27 years and now I'm going to be an ultra marathoner. Probably not going to happen. But maybe I could, walk down the hall a couple of times tomorrow, And I think it's the same with this. But like you, I love tea. I lived in London right out of high school. In fact, that's where I was when I became vegetarian and really learned to like tea. Now, I do put usually soy milk, sometimes almond milk in it. And that was something I learned in England when I put dairy milk in the tea. It was like, oh, where have they been keeping this brilliant idea? But I've discovered something. Actually, it was 2 years ago at the Portland, Oregon Veg Fest, this stuff called Blue Lotus chai. And I love chai tea. And I used to really be into the chai tea at Starbucks until I found out, oh my God, that stuff is so full of sugar. I should just go have a vegan hot fudge sundae. Why don't you? So I stopped having that for the most part. But this stuff is only tea and spices. There's no sugar. You can sweeten it if you want to, but it's so flavorful, I never do. And the cool thing about its being a powder is that you get a kind of richness. I mean, like people who like green tea will do this with the powdered matcha as well. And then you get all the nutrients, because when you're just kind of soaking the leaves or soaking a tea bag, you get that sort of water extract. But when you're actually using the tea itself, it's so rich and so good. So I just wanted to put in a word for the Blue Lotus chai people, sweet little vegan company, if anybody is a tea addict besides you and me.
I haven't tried the Blue Lotus, but since you just talked about it, I am going to have a cup of chai after this. Just like a good black chai. Oh, there's nothing like those spices in your mouth. And it's like a hug every sip. I just love it.
Well, it is. And that's really very Ayurvedic, because when you study Ayurvedic medicine, you learn that these spices are kind of on the edge between food and nourishment, between food and medicine, but not medicine in a pharmacological sense, but medicine in a healing kind of sense. It's very, very special.
I'm gonna have to check that out definitely, because a lot of the chai concentrates have honey and stuff, and so it's just nice to find things that are actually vegan that are chai. Yeah,
right.
One of the things that you did bring up was the Main Street Vegan. We haven't even talked about it yet. We've just been totally going down this other road. So, you want to how did you get started going down that path?
So we're talking about the academy or my being a Main Street Vegan?
All of it, really.
Okay.
Like, really, what got you, really trying to advocate for veganism in this way?
Okay. Well, ages and ages ago, before I'd even made it to vegan, I was going to college, but I was actually going to college late. I had gone to fashion school right out of high school, and I'd worked at a magazine and written for magazines. And I had the opportunity in my late 20s to go back to college and get a degree in comparative religions, which was my great interest. And I earned a fellowship for foreign study. The only requirement was that I had to leave the U.S. And if I did that, I could study anything I wanted. So I studied vegans in the UK. Now, I wasn't quite vegan, but I really wanted to be vegan, obviously, or I wouldn't have done that. And so I went over there in 1980 or 81 and met with the people who had founded the Vegan Society. I didn't meet Donald Watson, the actual founder, but I met with people who were around when the Vegan Society was formed in the 1940s. And these were incredible, powerful people, because when they went vegan, way back when they did it, nobody knew if they'd die or if their bones would rot. And I remember one woman telling me, we did it for pure, disinterested compassion. And that was so inspiring. So I wrote the paper that was required for the fellowship. It was serialized by the American Vegan Society and a wonderful man in England, John Wynne Tyson. And you can look him up. It's JONWYNNE-TYSON. Wonderful, wonderful writer. And he said, I will act as your literary agent. I will get you a publisher and we're going to publish this. And so I never thought I would write books. I thought Dickens wrote books. I didn't think I did. And so he did get me a publisher over there. And Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic and Exploration of Veganism was published as the first book on vegan philosophy and practice to ever come from a freestanding publisher. I mean, the Vegan Society and the American Vegan Society had published things, but to actually have an independent publishing house do a book on veganism, that was the first. And it came out in 1985. And then I wrote a couple of other books that had to do with being vegan. The Love Powered Diet, the first edition of that came out in the early 90s. That was about my weight loss journey. And then I thought, well, I've said everything I can say about being vegan. And so I turned from that as a professional topic and started writing about well-being and spirituality and other things. So I wrote a lot of books in that kind of self-help field. And I had some success with some of those. I was on Oprah a couple of times and the Today Show and, all that. And that was all good. And then in late 2010, I went to a PETA fundraiser and they showed footage of the terrible things that humans do to animals. Well, I'd seen that before, but for some reason that night my heart was just extra open. And all I wanted to do was be able to write them a check for $100,000, except it would have bounced. So I was in the subway, going home and just kind of talking to my higher power and literally got inspiration. I don't know how else to describe it, but I almost want to say told that my next book was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan. It was supposed to have 40 little chapters with a simple recipe at the end of each one. It was supposed to be geared to that young woman in Wheaton, Illinois, that I had been in 1983 when I finally made the switch. And so I called my literary agent and said, let's not do that book we were going to do. Let's do this one called Main Street Vegan. So we got a publisher. The publisher didn't like Main Street. They said it sounded like the Tea Party. So I was trying to write the book with some other name, and I was coming up with all these names that were pretty bland. And then I had a vegan miracle. And I do believe in vegan miracles because I am convinced that this is the age of the animal. This is the time when all the human-caused suffering that we've done to non-humans for as long as we have coexisted with them, this is the time when it is starting to lessen in a big way and will end. And that when you are really committed to this incredible force for good, some inexplicable things happen. So what happened to me was I was walking up Broadway and there was Michael Moore, the filmmaker. Now, I knew he had liked one of my earlier books, a weight loss book that I had written. And so I gave my card to the woman who was with him. I didn't want to seem like a fan or something. 10 seconds later, he is following me up Broadway saying, "Victoria!" And he said, "We need to talk. We need to talk about food." And we started doing that, and we started talking on the phone and talking about food. And I mentioned one night, this book I'm writing was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan. The publisher hates Main Street. He said, "They're wrong. Let me talk to them." So in a 3-way call with an Academy Award winner, my editor, and me, he convinced her, she convinced the higher-ups. And the day that she called to tell me that the book would indeed be called Main Street Vegan, Everything You Need to Know to Eat Healthfully and Live Compassionately in the Real World, then everything started to pop. And I knew all these other things were going to happen. And indeed they did. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Unity Online Radio, which is the radio ministry of the Unity churches. They're a kind of liberal Christian denomination that was founded in the 1800s by very vocal vegetarians. But over the years, that kind of vegetarian message had fallen away. So the person who was then the head of Unity Online Radio called me and said, "Do you want to have a show? You can call it Main Street Vegan. It's about time we get back to our roots." So that's been going on now for over 4 years. It's very successful and just love doing it. And as I know you love doing yours, podcasting is just one of the most amazing things. And another thing that came in addition to the podcast, a very successful book, was this idea for Main Street Vegan Academy to train and certify people as vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. Now, I live in New York City, and there are a lot of people here who seem like they just cannot live life unless they have lots of helpers. So I run into people who have a therapist and a personal trainer and a life coach and a dog walker, a hair cutter, the hair colorist, the manicurist, the pedicurist. They have all these people helping them do life. And I thought, you know what? These people are going to be wanting to go vegan before long, and they're going to need people to help them do that. So let's certify some people to help with that. And with the first course, I didn't know if anybody would come, but they did. And now we have had 13 classes. We're going to do our 14th in April. We've had 192 graduates from 11 countries. People have come from Australia, South Africa, even Saudi Arabia, which just blows me away. And there is nothing cooler than feeling like you're inspiring people to go out into the world in places where you may never be and know that they're carrying this incredible life-saving message. So that's how I spend my time, and I may be the luckiest person on earth.
So what do you actually teach in the academy?
Well, they come to New York, and people always say, "Why don't you put it online? You could make so much money." Well, you know what? I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this to change the world. And there is something about an actual experience. I believe nowadays more than ever, when we have so many virtual experiences, that when you actually have an real experience, it's mind-blowing. And that's what happens here. So they show up 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and we go until midday on Wednesday, and we pack those days. This is definitely an intensive. So we start early in the morning. I feed them breakfast. I learned after the first class that I need to do that because that way everybody will be here on time and we can start on time. And we basically have 3 tiers. The first is the vegan principles. So in that, we have animal rights and animal law, usually taught by Jasmine Singer and Marianne Sullivan from Our Hen House. Marianne is, of course, an animal rights attorney. Mm-hmm. Then we have nutrition. We have Nutrition 101, the basics of vegan nutrition. Then we have nutrition for the life cycle, learning how to work with pregnant women, children, teenagers, athletes, elders, everybody. And that's taught by Marty Davey, La Diva dietitian, registered dietitian. Martin Rowe from Lantern Books and from the environmental book group Brighter Green talks with us about the environment. Then we have both Leanne Hilgard of Vote Couture and Joshua Catcher of Brave Gentle Man. They're both fashion designers, and Joshua is also a professor of sustainable fashion at Parsons. And they talk about the fashion and beauty. And it's so interesting how the animal industries have trained people in what's aesthetically beautiful. They have trained us in a sort of aesthetic irrationality that if the final product is beautiful, it doesn't matter what happened before. But we know that that matters more than anything. So we have these courses of basic veganism. And people come having read a lot of books and having had their own life experience, so they have some knowledge of that already. But that's what we cover. And then we have communication. Oh, the other thing about veganism is I teach a class called The History of the Vegan, Vegetarian, and Raw Food Movements. And this all comes from the wonderful late historian Rin Berry, who taught for our first, I think, 7 classes before he passed away. And there's so much depth there going back into antiquity. And what I find when people come for the academy, because we play a little game in the morning called Veg Trivia, and I find out that most vegans these days know a lot about food. They know a lot about animals. They know quite a bit about nutrition. They know very little about our history. A lot of people think this all started with PETA in 1980. A lot of vegans don't know that Pythagoras, the great mathematician and philosopher, is believed to be the first vegan, and that vegetarians used to be called Pythagoreans. So we talk about all that stuff, and it's pretty cool. Then the second tier is communication, because once you know all this stuff, how are you going to get it across to other people? So we have classes in public speaking, classes in coaching techniques, classes in social media, all the ways to get the message out. And then we have our business segment, because if people really want to do this as a business, they're going to need to know marketing and branding and getting the word out. So we have classes in that. We have a class in how to take this into the corporate world. We have another class in the communication core about doing a food demo, and that's with Fran Costigan, the great pastry chef and author of Vegan Chocolate. One of our business teachers was called on by the Shark Tank TV show to write their business books. Michael Parrish Dudell is a real biz whiz these days, really young guy, just fabulous, and also vegan. So all our instructors are vegan. And in addition to all this incredible information, we do field trips. So we go to Laika magazine. That's Laika. It's a beautiful online and print publication. That's the vegan Vanity Fair. We go to the Brave Gentle Man haberdashery boutique and the Vote Couture coat boutique. We go to Moose Shoes, non-leather shoes, bags, and accessories. We go to High Vibe, which is a raw food and detox market. And what I've seen happen that is just so thrilling is that even though the certification is to be a coach and educator, and a lot of people are doing that. We have people working with individuals, speaking for groups, writing books, blogging, podcasting, all that. But we also have people who are inspired by the businesses that we visit to start other businesses of their own. So among our graduates, there is Kat Mendenhall, who is the brains behind Kat Mendenhall Vegan Cowboy Boots. And they're they're online, but now they're opening a brick and mortar in Dallas, in downtown Dallas. I mean, a vegan cowboy boot shop. How cool is that? Then we have a couple who did the program, and they're opening a vegan convenience store in Philadelphia that's called V Marks the Spot. We have a yogurt company, Bright Life Bright Life Foods that's just beginning. There's a cheese shop in Brooklyn, Riverdale Cheeses. And these people were all inspired to either make their dreams come true, or even their dreams just came to them while they were here. So that's the magic of Main Street Vegan Academy. I obviously could talk about it all night, and I know we don't have all night, but thank you for asking.
I can't believe we're already at an hour. How can people get a hold of you, follow your work, and, maybe go to the Academy?
Oh, bless you. Okay. Everything is at mainstreetvegan.net. Couldn't get the .com, but it is .net, and it seems to work. And that's Main Street, all spelled out, vegan.net. You can click on Academy, podcast, blog. It's all there. You can also follow us on Facebook at Main Street Vegan, and on Instagram at Main Street Vegan. On Twitter, it's me. It's at Victoria_Moran, Moran. And I love Twitter because it's fun to say short things.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. You guys are just delightful. Where are you geographically?
Salt Lake City.
Yep.
Oh, Salt Lake City. That's beautiful. I've been out there a few times. There used to be a wonderful kind of feminist bookstore. And unfortunately, as the independent bookstores have gone the way of, independent bookstores, it's no longer there. But I remember some really good literary times out there.
We have a really good, thriving vegan community now, too. It's really great.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that. And all the places that I went with various books in the 90s and the early 2000s. I want to go back now that there's all this vegan food.
Like, we have 3 vegan bakeries.
Whoa!
Yeah.
One just French pastries.
You're not serious.
Totally serious.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's amazing.
That's, we're so creative. I mean, I don't know of any other movement where people change their lives, they change a habit, they change a practice, but then they start all these incredible creative businesses and charities. And I mean, it's really fabulous. It may be that being vegan gives you a better brain.
Hasn't worked for me yet.
This week you heard
Second Guessing by Tussle.
Right now you're listening to
Hunted by a Freak by Mogwai.
I just wanted to give a little shout out to Simka, who gave it this awesome review on iTunes. This podcast is extremely helpful when you work at a boring job. Makes you feel like there's some hope, though I sincerely doubt we have much time left on the planet. The hosts are amusing, and most of the guests are well-informed and inspiring. I like that they are intersectional. I'd love to see an interview, though, concerning human overpopulation and the cost of it to other animals and the planet, and yeah, even to us humans. I also appreciate that they are considerate of their guests, but wouldn't mind hearing them challenge guests on occasion.
It's true, we don't tend to challenge guests enough. We do from time to time.
In my head, I have lots of curse words going off sometimes.
Yeah. A lot of times we look at each other and are like, what the fuck?
But no, I really would love to do an episode on overpopulation. If anyone has any suggestions on guests, let us know. We're totally down. But, just like this person did, we love your iTunes reviews. We love reading what you have to say, and I really just like reading them. So, please, go give us an iTunes review, and if you don't want to write something about the show, tell us your favorite joke, or tell us the last time somebody pissed you off, like what they said about why they couldn't be vegan. Give us your best reasons you can't be vegan excuses that you've heard. Leave them in the iTunes. Give us 5 stars and be like, this person said blah, blah, blah. I can't because of toenails. Whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, and the first person to mention toenails in an iTunes review will give you something.
Just email us when you do it. That way we know it's you. Say, hey, I just put this review up.
If you haven't yet become our friend on social media, you should be our friend. Like us, follow us, worship us, whatever you want to do, whatever the social media equivalent is. I do want to start a site where worship is an option. Worship. You know, because you can follow things, you can like things.
I was just
worship.
thinking the logistics of what that button would look like. I was wondering if you'd do like the hands
Oh
praying.
yeah, the praying
or
hand emojis.
kneeling down.
No,
or
just
a crown.
No,
or
just praying hand emojis.
like maybe
That's all it would
maybe
be.
a hand with a giant ring that says kiss. You know, like kiss the ring.
No,
There's lots of options.
there are.
We could even rotate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's take this brainstorming offline and get this done.
Definitely, because, you know, social media websites are so easy to make and become mainstream. That's why I do them all the time for people.
Can we have 3 other buttons on there that just say fuck, shit, damn, and they don't mean anything?
Oh, fuck. This has probably lasted a little bit too long. Fuck shit down. Oh, wait. I didn't say... if you would like to do a listener shout-out...
yeah.
So.
Do it.
If you'd like to do a listener shout-out and help support the show in the process, all we ask is that you donate at least $10. You also get some awesome swag, like a Which Side bandana. Or any bandana, I guess.
Sorry, I'm having a heart attack over here.
That's not what... Okay. I always forget what we say. I need to write shit down. Or just have it say. If you'd like to be our listener shout out, just go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the donate button. Besides the shout out, you also get some awesome swag like a Which Side bandana. So just go to whichsidepodcast.com.
You can also record it there yourself.
You can. If you don't feel comfortable recording it, and we can also speak the truth on behalf of your name.
Or we can get someone else to read it for you.
Or you could get someone else to read it for you.
Shit doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't really matter as long as you're giving us money. Let us be your shills.
Fuck shit, damn. Ain't that the truth? I have no idea what that means. That didn't make any sense.
No. Then,
Nope. Sorry.
No worries.
Yep.
That's what you get when you fuck shit down.
Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.